Hi, so welcome to another episode of Unexpected Perspectives. And I'm pleased to announce that I've been joined today by a very special guest and a good friend of mine, Bebe Oladipo.
That's right.
So welcome, Bebe.
Thank you so much, Mark. I'm really happy to be here.
That's great. And thank you very much for joining us. And just to say that this episode today is we're going to talk about how the lack of hospitality is costing you and your business millions. So, Bebe, maybe just a quick introduction, if you'd like to just introduction to our guests.
Of course. As Mark says, my name is Bebe. I am the head of IT program management and information technology, or information security, should I say, at the Azzurri Group. Now, the Azzurri Group is, if I said the Azzurri Group, people think, it's not a known brand name. But we actually own Zizi and Ask Italian restaurants. We also own Coco di Mama, which is more like an Italian grab and go. We tend to call ourselves like an Italian Pret. And also, we've just recently acquired a Mexican chain of restaurants called Boujam. So we're quite a diverse now. We're moving sort of not out of the Italian, but we're bringing in new brands, and Boujam is one of them. So it's quite my job there is quite varied in terms of looking after IT, program management, landing technology initiatives into our restaurants and shops. And then a big part of my role is cybersecurity and information security for the entire group as well.
Wow, that's I know even from my own experience, I've certainly experienced some of those fine restaurants as well, and
Good.
Very much looking forward to returning in the very near future.
We're happy to welcome you in any one of them.
Maybe later today, you never know.
Exactly.
So let's just kick off with this. So obviously you're very much involved in the hospitality industry. So what does hospitality mean to you?
That's quite an interesting question, Mark, because a lot of people, hospitality means different things to different people. But for me, it's really around looking after our customers. That's what it's about. It's putting your customer at the center of whatever you're doing. Just the word hospitality itself lends itself to the fact that you need to be hospitable, you need to be inviting, you need to be inclusive. And for us in the hospitality business, which, as you well know, Mark, it's been quite challenging in the last couple of years with all the different sort of challenges, should I say, that we're all facing, and we're not unique in that space. Everybody wants the customer. And for us, and for me personally, hospitality just really encompasses the fact that your customer is at the center of what you're doing. And whatever service, in our case, we are, bringing people into our restaurants to enjoy a good restaurant and an excellent, should I say, restaurant experience. And that involves not only the food you're serving on your plate to the customers, but also the environment in which they come into. So our restaurants and the sort of ambience of the restaurant, we want to make sure that the service is there. We want to make sure that our staff are also highly trained, because one of the things that you'd notice in hospitality as well is that when people leave their homes to actually come into your own space, it's an honor. It really is an honor for people to leave, because people can probably make their own dinner or whatever, but they make that choice to come to your establishment, to come and actually enjoy their time and spend their money. And eat good food and have good service and also a good environment. And for us, or for me personally, that sort of encompasses hospitality, and the service ethic has to be really around the customer.
And I suppose just extending on that, when you're looking at the service within each of the restaurant brands, how do you keep abreast of what's happening in the wider sector, such that you're not just, for want of a better phrase, matching the level of service, but really being the place to go to for the experience?
I think that's always, I wouldn't call it a challenge, but that's something that's always ongoing. I don't think that any one of us in what we call the Italian casual dining space can say that, we've got this formula. It's something that continues to grow because your customers are changing as well. Requirements are changing. So I'll give you an example. Back in our day, I mean, when I say back in our day, I've been in this business a long time, probably about, in professional life, about 30, 35 odd years. And back at that time, we were never really looking at things like allergies and food intolerances in the way we look at them now. Yeah. So you have to sort of make sure that you're always evolving to make sure that your customer and that service that you're providing is really at the top. And of course, these days we now have legislation as well that we all have to abide by. So that sort of leads you in that way. But if anybody says they've nailed it, I think it's a journey that we're all going, making sure that as things are changing, we're also changing. But, at the end of the day, the basic thing for me, it's I'm quite a sort of simple-minded human being. And I always look at things very simplistically, and it's a matter of why would somebody come into one of our restaurants and not go to one of our competitors? Because especially when, we're all serving pizza and pasta, for example. So what's different? And the example I always use is we all go to the supermarkets, and there's different supermarkets you can go into, and you go in there. Why would I go into one particular supermarket and buy a branded tin of beans as opposed to the other one? It could just be, I just like the way the rest of the supermarket looks, or the layout, or, there's somebody on the till who's just really wonderful, and I always go in there and have a chat, which is probably why I go there anyway, as you can imagine. But it's what sets you out, and we're all looking for that, nugget. And for me, it's really around the service that you're providing. There isn't a silver bullet that you just go, if we do this, we'll grab all the customers. Yeah. It just doesn't work that way.
So how do you keep in tune with the I suppose, the effectiveness, the quality of that customer service? How do you gain feedback? How do you know the customer is happy? Because I know certainly in the UK, customers tend to not necessarily be open and honest unless they are disgruntled sometimes. So how do you go about that?
Well, the thing is, we now have different channels. So, back in the day, you went into a restaurant, for example, and how do you give feedback? You probably said to the waiter or the waiting staff there, I've had a really good time.
Or I'm not paying.
Or I'm not paying. And that's it. Or somebody has a real go, get me the manager and all of that. That still happens. Of course, that still happens. But we're now in the world of social media, where there are different channels. So we do give customers the opportunity when they come into our restaurants. We give them an opportunity to give us initial feedback, sort of on the, at the table feedback to say this is, and we do it digitally. We have partners who do that for us, who can capture not only, have you had a good time, but also to dish level. So we can actually see this particular dish. How do you rate it? Thumbs up or thumbs down? So very sort of quick, give me your, at that point in time, your feedback. The other thing also is we allow customers, or we invite customers to also give feedback even after they've left the restaurant. Yeah. And again, we take that feedback very seriously, because feedback could be good. We all love good feedback. But to be honest, you learn from the ones that are not so good. And whilst nobody wants not so good feedback, that's where you actually get the nuggets of information and stuff that you can improve on, to say, okay, we failed on that, or we didn't, we fell short on our standards. Because, you can imagine in hospitality, we have a very diverse staff and teams who look after the restaurants, as well as in head office as well. And driving that service ethic to ensure that, people actually giving that from the minute a customer sets foot in the door, right to when they say goodbye. There shouldn't be any sort of degradation in the service that the customer is experiencing. So we make sure that we get feedback directly from the customer. We invite them to give us feedback after that. And, from the various channels as well, people use Facebook, they'll use Instagram, they'll use LinkedIn, any sort of other social channels that they can use to talk to us, they do. I see a lot of the emails, for example, that come in through customers. And some of them, when you get an email that's really good, you sort of go, wow,
what an impact you've
what
had.
an impact that, and
Exactly.
we always make sure that goes back to whoever dealt with that particular customer, so they know. So it's not always about, we're going to give you the bad feedback and you've been really bad and you haven't done well. Because when you give people good feedback, because people work really hard and they like to get that good feedback as well. So we have the different channels that we can...
That's a really good point you mentioned. Obviously, the importance of people, the importance of positive feedback as well as constructive feedback, for want of a better phrase.
Yes.
So I suppose maybe just delving deeper into the people side, what kind of training or what kind of personality traits, characters, or how are you, I suppose, motivating and inspiring your people to give that good customer service?
You know what, Mark? We're really lucky in the sense that because as I said earlier on, we have Zizi, we have Ask Italian. Now they're both sort of, Italian brands, casual dining brands, but on the high street, they are competitors. So whilst we're under the same umbrella, they all have their own different teams in terms of people teams, to look after the teams both in out in restaurants and also in head office. And both brands all our brands really are so dedicated in terms of the training they give to our restaurant teams, whether it's, whether we're starting menu training, so for the head chefs in terms of how they're cooking and how they're making sure that the food on the plate is something that they can be proud of to present to a customer. There is also a lot around how do you interact with customers? How do you deal with customers? How do you make customers, how do you make them inclusive? One of the things I mentioned earlier on is around dealing with customers who have allergies, for example. Now, nobody wants to walk into a restaurant and, of course, when they will ask you, are there any allergies on the table? And somebody says yes. You don't want to be that person to have the spotlight shining on you going, yeah, you're the one who's got a gluten-free allergy or whatever it is. So, there's a lot of training that goes in, and we've got really, really good, robust training programs run by wonderful people teams that help our teams. And it's interesting because it's not just, my work ethic has always been from a service perspective. So whilst we're talking about the restaurant teams and how they're giving that service to our wider customers, internally, we also look at the business units that we serve, being in IT, which is a service, if you like. We look at ourselves as a service unit. We look at the customers within the business as our customers as well. So we're making sure that, that service ethic, it's almost like the DNA that runs through the entire group, not just for the teams that are out there serving customers, but also for us within the head office, like serving each other. Because we look at each other as, we look at the other business units as our customers. So it's that sort of ingrained. But the people teams that we have do an excellent job in making sure that service to the customer is really top. And it's not just we give you that module of training and that's it. It's a continuous, it's part of their, development.
No, it's really good that you mentioned, obviously, the service-orientated approach is just as important inside the organization. I suppose, do you find there are different challenges you face compared to a service-orientated approach? Obviously, it's the end customer compared to internal customers. How?
They do differ because obviously your customers internally, they're not paying customers, they're your colleagues. So you're working within head office, trying to obviously support those guys who are in the front line as well. But in the same vein, I think that when you look at it from a simplistic, basic thing, service is service. That's what it should be, regardless of who as long as you drive that ethic and you drive that service ethic, what you then find is it becomes almost natural to people. So whilst you might be saying, but you're my colleague and you're not a paying customer, and what are you going to sort of tell the boss that I didn't give you, you still have to maintain that. And that's really, sometimes, especially new people coming in, they're going, no, but it's Bob who sits next door to me. Why, he's not a customer, is he? Well, he is. Because people come in thinking, customer is only that person in the restaurant who's paying, who's coming to have a meal with their family or whatever. But, we try to drive, and I personally try to drive the fact that we're all customers to each other. And when you start to drive that ethic, it then becomes easy, if you like. And more importantly, natural and authentic. It's not something that people wear a cloak and go, oh, today I'm going to put my service hat on. It should just be part and parcel, regardless of whether you're in IT, finance, because as well as I do, Mark, nothing annoys you more than or irritates you, should I say, more than when you email a colleague who's literally maybe in the same building as you, and you don't hear back. So what's your service level in that sense? We who work in IT, for example, part of the IT department looks after everything to do with people's laptops, and we have a service desk, if you like, within the IT department. We look after everybody in head office and some of the restaurant teams as well. So you have to have that sort of service level as well internally to say, if you log a ticket and say, your laptop is not working, you don't want to wait 2 weeks.
Definitely not.
Exactly. So those are the sorts of that sort of framework we start to put in place, which works. And then when you support the restaurants, you've actually got the authority to actually say, you know what, if we're providing that internal service, you guys should be doing the same as well.
I think that's certainly, from my experience, is very important from the organizational perspective. Not, as you said, not just thinking about the end customer, but thinking about all the bits and pieces that happen behind the scenes that all need to come together in order to ultimately support the end customer. And I think often I see that is sometimes lacking, is the disjoint between who is the end customer we're trying to service and what is happening internally, and losing focus, losing track of what is really important.
That's right, yes.
What role would you say perhaps leadership have in ensuring a service-orientated or a very customer-focused?
I think, anything sort of, people always say, you should set the example from the top, and you should all filter down. And that makes absolute sense. But I also think that it also comes the other way as well. So you can also manage up. But I think for us leaders, it's really that sort of openness to understand, because there are some, I wouldn't say us, but there are some other organizations where you have that disconnect. I think you used the word just now, Mark, where you have the restaurants and the shops on this side, and then you have what they call head office, which is this ivory tower on this side, and it's a complete disconnect. And our colleagues in the our teams in the restaurants and shops think that, what, we can't even get hold of anybody in head office. If you send an email to head office, nobody responds, and that sort of thing. So I think with leaders, it's trying to bridge that gap and making sure that it's one group. It doesn't matter. We are central functions that need to support our restaurant teams and our store teams, but not make this sort of us and them, because the us and them never works. It just doesn't work. And you then get people in restaurants who are completely disillusioned, and what you'll get is they'll be going, people in head office don't know what it means. I also think that leaders should also go out and experience what it's like in restaurants. Now, I remember when I was, because I came from retail, I've always been a pure IT professional, but I worked at Mothercare. In fact, started in insurance back in the day when it was Sun Alliance, then it became the Royal and Sun Alliance. And I moved from there and I went to Mothercare. Really loved that business. But we also had this where we had this huge head office, and then we had all the shops. And one of the things I learned there, and I was there for nearly 10 years, one of the things I learned there was they were very good at making sure that people from head office went into shops. So you go in there and you experience what it's like to give service. Now, if you remember, we're old enough to remember when Mothercare in its heyday, we had, 98% of parents or young parents or parents to be going into a Mothercare store. And what they had was a very solid training program for the staff, because you're going in there as a young mother, maybe first-time parent, and you're trusting to get that service. So getting that experience in store really helps. And we're doing the same thing now in hospitality, where people should go and see what it's like in the cold face, so they can actually understand the pressures that the teams out there are under. But more importantly, what can we learn to make things better? Because it's all about being customer-centric and delivering that service to a very, very high standard.
No, that takes me back to my children's days.
Well, there you go.
Getting, I don't know how many different strollers and buggies and pushchairs to cater for every single different scenario,
right.
for every different single use case. I'm going, okay, help.
Exactly. And you trusted, because, we who knew the sort of training that we used to deliver to our store teams at that time, you walked in there, especially, you could see the difference between first-time parents and people who were coming for their, second, third child. And the first-time parents are just like, just help me here. I really, apart from a bath and a baby grow, I don't know what else. And the staff would tell you what car seat to buy, which facing, front facing, back facing, and you trusted them.
Yeah.
And we trusted them because we knew the sort of training programs that, that they got as well. But if you bring that into, say, hospitality, for example, Mark, how many times have you been to a restaurant and you've said to the, they present you the menu, and then you start having a conversation with the waiting staff going, which of these dishes, because I've never been here before, what do you recommend?
Yeah.
And you trust them. And they will say to you, oh, how about that one? And even their demeanor and the way they will sell it to you, if you like, you're sold before they finish.
I'm curious. Do they actually try all the different menus? So they come up with their own kind of like, that's my favorite.
They do. Especially when we do a new menu. They do. There's a lot of training that goes. Obviously, the chefs have got to deliver the food, but staff also, and even some of us in head office. That's when we visit restaurants. Sounds like I'm in the wrong profession. I need. That's when we visit restaurants.
Do you have an internship going, Bebe?
You never know. See me after class. See me after class. But really, that, so you sort of get that trust, and you think, oh God, yeah, he's recommended that. And sometimes you have the meal and it's great, so you think, that wasn't really great. But then, because of the rapport you've actually then created between yourself, you can actually, I didn't really like that. And then, and some of it's word of mouth and recommendation. And that's what, but for us, it's really bridging that gap. If leaders can actually go in on a regular basis, not just the sort of fanfare and just turn up when you want to, just turn up.
Understand.
Say,
yeah.
And just say, I'm here. What are the, for some of us in IT, we go in there, and the minute most of them know me because I've been in the group now for coming up over 11 years. And much as I try to disguise myself to go, that's Bebe from IT. So they'll tell you their different challenges and stuff. But sometimes I just like to sit there and just observe. And see how they're interacting, and it's so interesting the things you pick up, because customers, and we are all customers as well, are very different.
Yeah.
Very, very different, and it's always nice to see how they interact with them.
I think certainly one of the things I noticed in my experience is that the importance of, you're talking about going to sit with the team, almost like being in a position where you really understand what's going on, empathizing with them, their challenges, their opportunities. Because I often see the two sides. One is actually, what are your challenges? But also, a lot of great ideas come from anywhere.
Oh my God, yes.
And I think an organization that really opens itself up to listening, not just to themselves at that level, but actually everywhere, because they are the closest to the customer.
Exactly. And they know what works.
Exactly.
So we can sit in the ivory tower, if you like, and come up with, this is the best solution for this. But until you actually go and implement it within the restaurant or in the coalface or in the shops, you have no idea. And you're right, Mark, a lot of the time we're solutionizing and we're talking about how this would work, and then you put it in the restaurant or in the shop. If you then don't follow up with the actual users, the guys who are going to live and breathe this, and what does it mean for them and all of that sort of thing, you're missing a trick. Because they're the ones, some of them, and we do sort of, because of the sort of relationships that we have, going back to my point about bridging that gap between head office and restaurants and shops. So they feel confident in saying to you, actually, that didn't work for us, and this is why it didn't work for us. and then you can go back. But if you don't have that sort of relationship and you're just this ivory tower who does the telling all the time,
that's a really good point, actually.
That doesn't work.
The importance of, it's certainly in my experience, how important relationships are.
Yep.
And no matter what business you are, it's actually one of the key ingredients to success is building those strong relationships.
Completely agree. I always say to people, especially, because part of my job is landing, tech solutions into our restaurants and shops. I always say to people, your general managers, your ops managers, they're your best friends. Because once you get them on side and include them in your solution, so you're not just this telling person going, you will do this and you will do that. It's a dual communication and say, okay, and yes, we always have to say, okay, this is what we're doing because it's part of the strategy and all of that. So you can't go too far one end where it's also loose and you don't deliver anything. But you've got to include them in that process because they're the ones who are going to use it. And to be honest, I've come from retail, I've come from hospitality. Store teams, retail teams, they're very vocal. They will tell you. They will tell you if something's working or if something's not working. They're very good at that. But you've got to give them the vehicle to do that.
I think that's because they are feeling the heat at the moment.
Yeah, of course.
And usually in the back office, you're not necessarily feeling that heat. So you can't really...
Yeah, which is why I always say, you know what, always go and experience that heat. Understand what they're going through on a daily basis. We can remove ourselves and go back into head office. They can't. And, come rain, come shine, they're there. They're dealing with different customers, different requirements, different needs, and quite rightly so, because that's how society is. Everybody is very different. Yeah. It could be really boring if we're all the same. But that's that, and they have to do that. So we need to make sure that whatever we're delivering to them is going to give them the time to actually do the main job, which is serving our customers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just moving slightly away or similar, but how more into the sort of like the technology and the cybersecurity space. We touched upon earlier about obviously the importance of customer service internally to an organization. But what tends to happen from my experience is that sometimes the direct benefits to the end customer tend to be diluted the further back you go into the kind of like the back office or the head office functions. So I suppose, how important is almost like service in security and technology, and do you have to take a different approach to be able to do the right things or get the right level of support for technology or cybersecurity investments, for example?
You know what, I think that having come from retail back in the day, we always said retail was quite ahead of hospitality in terms of tech and all of that. And I think I saw that when I first came into hospitality, 12 years ago now. And what you find is that tech is tech. You have to put tech in, because we were talking just now about service. If there are a lot of manual tasks or things that they're doing that is actually stopping them from serving the customer, that we can automate or can make better with tech, then we do that. There's no doubt about that. But you're right in terms of the fact that you have to look at things and go, okay, so we're going to implement this solution. What does it mean right at the end? There's some of the solutions you'd put into a restaurant or a shop that you can't necessarily put that direct link between this is what we've put in, this is how much is going to add to the bottom line. There are others that would give you an immediate business case, if you like. So an example is we put in handhelds into our restaurants, where we give the restaurant teams a handheld device, which is both an ordering device and a payment device. So what that does, it allows the restaurant teams to actually serve the customer quicker. We turn tables quicker when we need to. So in our event restaurants, for example, where people are going to watch a football match, they're not going to sit in your restaurant for 3 hours. They just want to come in, have a meal, pay, and go. Yeah. And we know that the bit of the dining experience that customers still complain about is the payment bit, where you're trying to attract someone to go, I'm done now, can you get the bill? Then they go, they come back, they bring a payment machine. By that time, you've lost the will to live.
Yeah.
So these machines actually give them the opportunity to go, I need to pay my bill. There you go. Or we've also implemented a pay and order at table, so customers have a choice and they can mix and match and say, order with the waiter, pay on the app, and vice versa. So that sort of technology actually does sort of enhance and help. But at the basis of all of that, we're a hospitality business.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned cybersecurity, for example. Now, I was giving a talk at a university in Kent the other day, and we're talking about cybersecurity and hospitality. How does that happen? And people don't realize that, first of all, we take payments. So we have to make sure that our payment channels are safe for our customers, because if they're trusting you with their credit card details, you should be able to make it safe so they don't then get scammed and all of that. We also collect customer data. So when you book a table, or we have a CRM, so our customer relationship management system, which, where you get the different offers and different emails, we also have to make sure that we're capturing and keeping that data safe as well. Because obviously when GDPR turned up, you always have that regulation that you have to abide with. So when you start to talk about hospitality and cyber, people never made that link. And then all of a sudden you actually start to say, these are the different touch points, whether it's your booking information, whether and people will give you their personal information because we have to call you back or confirm your booking, things like that. So we then have to start to build up our own cyber strategy as well to ensure that we are that safe business, that people give you their data and for a fact that, or they know that it's safe with us as well.
I think that's a very good point. I think whether it's cybersecurity or technology, being able to translate back what you're doing and why you're doing it directly back into the business benefit for the customer. So whether that's for cybersecurity, building and enhancing trust, enabling payments, or whether it's enabling efficiency in the restaurants, customer experience. So I think having that in the mindset is really good, actually, and it'd be good to see many other organizations follow that kind of approach.
I hope so, Mark. And I think that, when people talk about cyber, I've worked in PCI, so the payment card industry, for a very long time. And I can probably say when I first started, it's very dull. It's a very dull sort of subject, but
I can imagine,
the impact of not doing it properly is huge because, like I say, people come in and they trust you with their card data. They trust you, they pay, they expect that you pay, you go to the bank, you get the authorization, it's done. They don't expect that 3 days later they've been scammed because they use their credit card in your restaurant. And that sort of brand damage is not what any one of us wants. So getting the leaders, if you like, to first of all, I've been doing PCI now for, I'll probably give my age away, a very, very long time. And it's one of those things where you say to the leaders, we need to do this. But initially, some leaders would think, oh, how does that translate to money in the till?
Pounds and pence.
Okay. And, whilst it may not be direct, but you have to look at what is the cost of not doing it and not doing it properly. And of course, the bigger your business is, and because your acquirers would rank you now, we're a level 1 because we transact over 6 million credit card transactions in a year. So you really have no choice. You've got to do it. But it's then, because we always say, for example, that, payment card security and cybersecurity is not an IT issue. It's, it's a business issue. Now, it might have to sit somewhere, and most businesses you'll find probably sits in IT, or IT is the home for it, especially if you have to make some infrastructure changes and, all of that sort of thing. But it's getting it out there that it's a business issue. Business owns it.
Yeah.
And we're all part of that, that framework, if you like, to deliver. And when you have and we're all on a journey, because the cybersecurity and the tech, it doesn't stop. You don't just put these things in and go, yeah, we're done now, because technology changes anyway. And as well as I do, Mark, in terms of cybersecurity, the criminals are 3-4 steps ahead of you anyway. So if you think you've done something and you're just going to sit back now on your hands. Yeah,
I think a lot of people forget that those adversaries aren't bound by the same rules and regulations.
Exactly.
They don't have to go looking for a budget to go and
Not at
perform
all.
this kind of security assessment.
And they don't have any customers going, oh my God, you did this. So, what's in it for them?
Their brand reputation is probably a little bit tarnished already. So I don't think they're not. It's
That's
not really
not front and center in their mind, is it really?
No,
not at all.
not at all.
Yeah, and that's why for us, we're on that journey, and a lot of because we all talk to each other. So I talk to my peers, and we meet at different conferences and events like that, and everybody's trying to do the right thing, but and people take different routes to do that. But I always say, get on the journey, start that journey, and you'd learn so much in terms of what you need to do. And as I said to you, the students were going, oh, we didn't realize, we thought that, maybe it was only the banks, for example, or our retail. And I said, no, with hospitality, we do carry a lot. And even internally, we talked about internally and customers as well. The business internally are my customers. I'm in charge of information security for the group, which means that I need to make sure that all of us as employees, we give our personal data. In fact, a hell of a lot, because you have to get paid. So your bank details, your age, your date of birth, your next of kin, all that information.
Yeah.
And we need to make sure that that's safe as well. So it's not just only your outside facing customers, it's internal as well. And because we deal with quite a lot of who I call strategic partners, we also need to make sure that they're also on the journey, and they can prove to us that they're also on that journey in a good place, have a decent cyber posture, because if they get a breach, we're all in it together as well.
That's true. I think going back to your point about the students in Kent, I think sometimes people don't actually see the big picture and
That's right.
how I suppose how expansive the issue is, and how far-reaching it reaches across all the organisation, internally and externally.
That's right. Yes.
One of the things that comes to light is also that the importance of communicating, selling, awareness of cybersecurity technology and the benefits to the business. And how much of your role do you say is around basically selling and marketing?
A lot. As I said earlier on, I started it. So I was part of the Gondola Group, which was a group that had Pizza Express, Ask Italian, Zizi, and Byron Hamburgers, and Kettner's, which was a champagne bar in Soho. Really lovely place. I think it's still
that right?
It's still there now. And so I started the PCI journey there for them as well. And initially, as I said, it's not an interesting subject. It's quite dull. So what we had to do then was actually, because the businesses and Azzurri Group, we do it now, where the different brands have what they call a team brief on a monthly basis. So I took that as an opportunity when I was in Gondola to go and start initially talking about PCI. And of course, people's eyes glazed over and said, what is she talking about? What does this mean for us? But slowly and surely, they realized that, look, what this could mean is that we could get a breach, and you talk about the different fines, and you talk about, and people start, I might say I scared them into submission for some of it, and you have to do those scare tactics, because again, what you find in hospitality and retail is the same. Our general managers are quite competitive. So nobody wants to be the restaurant that has caused the breach for the entire group. So people took it on really seriously, and they understood that, we wrapped around not only on the system side, that this is the payment device, you've got to look after it, but the process around things that you don't take a customer's credit card from them and walk away, and you wrapped the whole process around it so that people knew, in the restaurant how they deal with it, in head office as well with our loss prevention teams, how they dealt with anything that came from the restaurant. So there was a lot of, initially they were really scared, I would tell you that for sure. And talking to our finance director going, you're the CISO, if something goes wrong, the accountability stops here. So that actually made it quite easy in terms of funding as well, because there has to be you have to fund these projects. And it became something that I can sit here and proudly say is now part of our DNA, right from Gondola Group into the Azzurri Group, where whenever we're doing budgets, that's something that nobody questions because it has to be done. And as I said, because of the way hospitality is, and I'm sure retail is the same, where you have an influx of staff, people come and go, you have people working different shifts, you have people who are full-time, you have people who are part-time, people turn up on 2 hours on a Sunday or Saturday. So you have to make sure you capture all of them. And what we've done, we're very lucky in that we have an online training system. So we use that to make sure that when anybody joins the business, whether it's in head office or in the restaurants or shops, they go through the PCI module, first of all. It's almost like you can't do that, you can't do knife skills, you can't go into the kitchen if you haven't done your knife skills training, for example. So we make sure that that's done, and then we do it on an annual basis as well. So we're capturing everybody and understand. So you're selling it in, but you're also getting the awareness going as well, because that's really key. We're not turning people into security experts. They're restaurant teams. Their job is within the restaurants. However, they've got to know what these are as well. So the cybersecurity, how you deal with customers and all of that, and it's all part and parcel. So we make sure that it's an ongoing thing, and we keep, we use the team briefs again to reinforce the messages. We use our GMs, as I said earlier on, they're your best friends, your GMs, your ops managers, because nobody wants to be the area or the part of the business that's caused the problem. So they do take it very seriously. And I'm proud to say now that we are in that position where cybersecurity, PCI, so payment card, security, all of that is now part of our DNA within our group.
No, I think that's really good, because I think many organizations, certainly that I've had exposure to, tend to take security as a bolt-on, and they don't necessarily think of it in the context of their own internal business processes, because the most effective way security is when it is part of someone's job.
That's right.
Whereas just one or two little tick or one or two checks in a normal day-to-day process. I certainly from my experience in hospitality, it's like when you have almost like a opening restaurant day, you'll do a quick, as well as all the, I suppose, the traditional hospitality checks. There'll be one or two related to the car terminals to check, are they okay? Have they been compromised?
Exactly.
And it just becomes a natural extension of their role.
Yes, and we add it into daily tasks as well. So, almost like when they're doing their, checking the fridge temperature, checking to make sure, we call it a safe to open. All of that, they do the checks to make sure that the payment terminals have not been tampered with. Even simple things like, are they charged and ready, so that you can get the best of them. But, from a security perspective is, have you got the number you always had? So if you had 6 and then all of a sudden you've got 5, where's the 6th one? What has happened to that? So making sure that, and that has become part of what they do. The other thing, Mark, just to mention, in terms of, how does leadership sort of make this happen, it's really making them aware as well. Yeah. Because again, there is no leader who wants to be the one who has to stand in front of the press to say, we've had a breach, and this is how it's affected our customers and all of that. So bringing in the stakeholders within the group as well, and it's all the different areas of the business, whether it's finance, whether it's supply chain, whether it's HR, everybody together to come and say, this is what it'll mean. These are the touch points for your particular area within the business. So we then have to delve deeper. And sometimes it can be challenging when we have a partner come in to help us and they have to sit with these business units. Initially, it's like, why are you asking me all this? But then the way you sort of frame it and sell it to them and let them understand what the impact could be, I always say, look, think about when you do it wrong, or think about when you don't do it at all. And I sincerely believe in my heart that doing nothing is not an option, not in this day and age anymore. Yeah. Cybersecurity is not something that people should just say, oh, it would never happen to me. It's not a matter of if, as we always say, it's when. That's the thing. So, it's that joined up thinking and my job is to ensure that the dots are joined.
No, that makes perfect sense. What could we perhaps learn from other industries outside Do you look at other industries like hotel industries, which is very much a concierge kind of philosophy, whereby it is all about customer experience? Do you see similarities in certain types of industries that you could take away?
I think everybody now has come to sort of that realization or that light bulb moment that the customer is so important, because we're all chasing we're all customers. We're all chasing the customer. Everybody would love to say, you know what, you only go to this hotel or that hotel or this shop or that shop or this restaurant or that restaurant. So, you look at, as I said, I was quite lucky. I came from retail and I came from a mother care, which was so refreshing and so rewarding because of the sort of customers you're dealing with. That almost gives you the incentive to see that they got it right in terms of that customer service and trust and people understanding. So you look at other organizations or other, people like, in retail, for example, again, it's, you want the customer, and because we've got different channels as well. Yeah. So, you can come into our restaurant, you can order online, you can use our delivery partners, for example. But as far as the customer is concerned, they want to have the same experience. Now, retail had done that quite a while ago, where you could go into, say, a John Lewis store, you could shop online on the web, you still get the same experience. So, I think all the other sort of sectors are now, we're all sort of going to the same place. The hotels are great because you walk in there and it's like, because they know this is going to be your home from home for however many days or whatever you're staying there. So they've got that, and everybody now, and even our security partners, for example, there's one of our partners who now talks about they've got a concierge service, and you sort of think, security, concierge? But it's around how they actually manage our security force and the level and the service level they give. And the fact they called it a concierge, you sort of think, okay, I'm expecting that level, and so far they're delivering.
No, that's really good. I think, similarly, my philosophy is always about wowing the customer at every interaction. Yep. So no matter what the touch point is, from start to finish, no matter what the channel is, similar to hospitality, the whole principle applies both in, it's almost like taking that hospitality, that tourism into professional services.
That's right,
And it should be de facto, but I think in organizations, complexity, training, all these fundamental things all need to come together.
They all need to go, that's right,
to enable that to happen.
And you know what? We can't shy away, Mark, from the fact that funding has got to be there as well. These things are not done on the cheap. You just can't do them if you do them on the cheap, you get something it's not valuable to the group as well. So it's a matter of investing in people, giving people time, giving people creating a safe environment for people to actually flourish and give that service that you expect as a customer as well. Because for me, I always put myself, sometimes I'll go, okay, today I'm coming into the restaurant, I'm a customer, I'm not Bebe from IT, it doesn't work, but hey. And it's just to sort of understand and feel like a proper customer. But I think, to be honest, I think everybody's on that journey now. Everybody, even the government, we talked about, the different sectors, and you talked about, retail or hospital, even the government departments now, everybody's quite service oriented. You speak to them and you think, okay, I'm getting a vibe from you that you're actually looking after me as a human being, and the way that the manner in which they'll talk to you, and you can almost tell that people are now getting that sort of service-oriented training and awareness and understanding that every single customer is a valuable customer and they should be treated as such. So when they leave your establishment, they leave with that sense of, I've left my home to come here to actually have a meal. I could have done it at home perhaps, but I decided I'm going to treat myself. Let them leave feeling that, they've actually, your team has actually done that for them. So I think everybody's on that journey. And I think for me, it's getting people to understand that it's not a one-off. It's a constant journey. You have to change with the times and change with the requirements and change with your customers, but keep that thread of your service ethic right through, from back office to front of house.
So what would you say is almost like that secret sauce? What's the secret sauce? Because many organizations will aspire to achieving that philosophy, being able to be really customer-centric throughout. From my experience, quite a number of organizations have a big difference between the vision and the actual translation to actually implementing that philosophy throughout an organization. So what do you think is that?
Is there a secret sauce? Is there a silver bullet? I think it's just that commitment.
Or an ingredient, should I say?
You know, I think it's the commitment to actually keep at it. First of all, understand what your strategy is. What are you as a group? What do you want to be known for? First of all, if you want to be known as that group of restaurants or shops that when you go in there, you get that feeling, that warm feeling, if you like. So how do we do that? How do we give our customers and ourselves that warm feeling? And, you know, it just goes back to the basics. It goes back to the basics. If we all together have that service ethic, we talked about it earlier on, where it's not just those people who are front facing to our customers, but also us within head office. So you have that, it's a thread that runs through, and you lead by example. And both ways. It's not just leaders talking and saying and telling.
Yeah.
It's also incorporating everybody, and we're all one together. So whether there's a secret sauce, I'm not sure.
I think you're right in the context that it is a number of, maybe not a secret sauce, but it's almost like a number of ingredients. And what is the right balance between all these ingredients?
That. As my mother, God rest her soul, always used to say to us, when you're cooking a dish, and you're getting all the ingredients and you put everything together and it's looking great and you're tasting it and going a bit more seasoning here, but it only takes that extra bit of seasoning to ruin it all, usually salt. So you taste it and you think, okay, I'll just add a little more.
Yeah.
And then there's that threshold where you go and you've missed it and you've completed. And for us, that's what we're trying to do, to say, okay, what's this dish we want to make, and who forms part, who are all the ingredients? So we are all ingredients of this wonderful dish and if somebody comes in, it's almost like you're baking a cake. And again, my mom used to say to us, don't crack the eggs straight into the batter. Crack the eggs in a separate, because you might get a one that's really bad.
Yeah.
And you've ruined your entire cake. So, again, you deal with those slightly differently. And everybody's so different. We all have different personalities. It's how do you make that work so that we're all this ingredient that makes this wonderful pizza or pasta?
Oh, sorry.
Are you hungry already?
I don't know whether it's a pizza or pasta that was did it. But I think, going back to what you're saying, I think, the importance of leadership and the right kind of leadership.
Yes.
Almost compassionate leadership, I like to call it. It's the ability to empathize, understand, embrace, empower, trust, listen, active listening.
Yep.
All these are important ingredients in the leadership part.
That's exactly it, Mark. And I think that, I'm old enough to know back in the day when we had leaders who you couldn't even talk to. You couldn't even approach, because they were either in an office where you'd walk past and you'd have to talk to his secretary back in them days before you never even got to know. And again, depending on what level you were in the organization, you probably never even knew where their office was, because you had no business there, because they just didn't interact with you. I think times are changing now. And leaders are actually, when people talk about leaders, you think, but they're actually human.
Exactly.
They are human beings. And there's a lot of pressure on all of us, and accountability and all of that. But at the same time, let's tap into the human factor. For me, it's that human factor sometimes that actually works. And that might be the secret sauce. It's the humanity of it that makes everything work. As in my experience, you're not just this, if I go in somewhere and go, I'm Bebe from IT, and you have this sort of, it doesn't work. It really doesn't. And we have to bring humanity into it, because we are hospitality at the end of the day.
Exactly.
We really are.
Very much a people business.
Yes.
I think going back to a quote from Simon Sinek, who's a great speaker and all things leadership. And he has a quote that goes something like, "It's not about leadership. It's not about being in charge, but about taking care of the people who are in your charge."
That's it.
And the most important thing for a leader is actually helping others to be leaders in their own right.
That's right. That's exactly it.
And going back, leadership for me is exactly as you said. It is at any level. It's not about rank.
No,
it's
it
purely
shouldn't.
about.
It really shouldn't. And there are organizations who are still in that space, and there are others, and we're all on a journey. Nobody will sit here and go, "Oh, we've got it right." We're all moving to that. But when you take humanity out, we all just become robots, and it doesn't work. And in my experience, it's never worked. And if I've done this for so long, and humanity for me and the people, and taking people with you and listening, as you rightly said, listening and taking people's views as well. It's not about you telling all the time. There's sometimes you have to be quite prescriptive on some stuff, but it's an 80-20,
Exactly.
Get people included, talk to them, listen to them, get them to, and the only way they will trust you is when you listen to them, but also do something about it. There's no point listening and then folding your hands. You need to do something about it as well.
Yeah, I think, through my experience as well is, we're always constantly learning. But one of the things that sets yourself apart is actually learning to unlearn as well.
That's
so
right.
there are many people in leadership positions or should I call them management positions who perhaps lack the ability to unlearn, which is more important than actually learning, because
That's right.
Because what we did today won't necessarily be the right thing tomorrow.
Exactly that. Because again, as I think I said earlier on, we're serving a changing environment. We're serving our customers changing all the time, and they're becoming more aware as well. So, you'd be surprised the number of GDPR queries we get, because people are now aware that, my data is my data. Now I have rights. So, your customers more aware, they're changing, and they've got different avenues as well to communicate with you, but also to communicate out to the entire world, if you like, to say, I've had a good experience or I haven't. So we all have to be cognizant of all of that. And as you rightly say, Mark, the leadership aspect of it is really, really key. You listen, you learn, you also create a safe environment where people can challenge, because leaders can be wrong. Of course, we all can be. Management can be wrong. We can get it wrong. But if you don't create that environment, it's just, you then have this sort of organization that people are just not, they don't even feel free to say anything. Or we're all, we all have confines of where we work and, all of that. So there's language and correct the way you behave and stuff. But take all that aside and just create that safe environment where people can express themselves and express their thoughts and know that they're heard. But more importantly, both us in head office and our customers, everybody underlying wants to feel valued. And the only way you can value people is to give them the service that they expect from you. And
I like to think if you look after your people,
they will look after
they will look after your customers. Sure. And it's almost like intrinsic. It's because, once you have employee number 2 in your business, then you have to trust and enable and empower them.
And also the other thing, Mark, is also to reward your teams as well. So because we get feedback, whether you ask for it or not, as we talked about earlier on, the different channels that feedback will come from. Recognize when somebody's done something really outstanding, recognize them, call them out, because they might be that mentor for some other person who might say, actually, I want to do that. I want to be that person. And then you start to build that service ethic and that sort of, value through your organization. But it's not easy. And everybody, as I said, is on a journey, and we will continue. But if we're all working to that destination, getting there, we'll all get there. And once you have that as your framework, anybody who comes in, it's like people who join your family. If your family is quite tight and you're all holding hands, what you expect is whoever joins should just come in and go, okay, you break up, I'll join, and I'll be, and I'll hold hands with. So instead of causing a break, they just come in, fit in, whether it's in-laws or whoever, and they form that, they join that tight-knit family. It's exactly the same. Exactly the same.
100%. So maybe just one final question, or hopefully a takeaway for our audience.
For sure.
What would you say is the one or two key nuggets for a leader to improve their top and bottom line? What's the key thing that they need to do?
If I knew that, I'd be very rich. I think we've implied it in the conversation that we've been having.
Yes.
It's being accessible, and also with leaders, because again, people think that leaders have all the answers. They probably don't. And sometimes it's almost showing that vulnerability, if you like, to say, I'm actually open to ideas and to learn. I might be the leader and I might be the one, leading you guys, but I don't know it all. And nobody does, but nobody wants to admit that. So it's almost, be accessible. If you have vulnerabilities and you're comfortable to show them to maybe your peers, then there's nothing wrong with that. Ask for help.
Yeah.
And also, it's not always at that level, because you can, as we talked about earlier on, Mark, you can learn top down, bottom up as well. There's some marvelous ideas we've had from people who are not leaders in an organization or who are not in management positions. So it's actually being open as well. Being open, be as accessible as you can be, because leaders are always very, very busy and, all of that. But make yourself and when you say something, stand behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's how people will trust you, both the people who work with you, by you, for you, whatever the organization. If you're leading in an organization and people cannot trust you because you've failed them so many times, they won't go with you.
I think trust is very important.
Trust is really key. So for me, that is the humanity part of it, as I mentioned before, and that trust. And I think if you put those together, we're all vulnerable in different ways, aren't we?
We're all human.
We're all human at the end of the day.
We all make mistakes.
Yeah, that's it. So you know what? As I think if we do that we might end up with a secret ingredients, not necessarily one source or one ingredient, but I think if leaders do that, you'll find that the organization will then, it becomes natural for them.
Exactly. So for me, what I take away from our conversation is very much around wrapping it up is the compassionate leadership.
Yes, that's it.
Compassionate leadership. And the other thing we touched upon with respect to service is the importance of having almost like that concierge philosophy.
That's right.
So the customer is at the heart
all
of
the time.
Every part of the journey.
Customer-centric all the time and service-driven.
Well, thank you very much, Bebe. It has been a real pleasure to have you here today in London for a change.
Yes.
I think next time maybe you can come to Dubai and we'll film there.
Nice. Well, it's on record now, so I will be there. But thank you so much for having me. And we could have talked forever. But yes, I think I've really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it.
Really appreciate you taking time out to be with me
today.
today.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
And thank you very much for all our viewers and listeners. And please tune in for another episode of Unexpected Perspectives. And hope you've enjoyed the episode. And thank you.